Welcome to the Explainer. You ever wonder how prices actually get decided? I mean, in a market with millions of buyers and sellers, how does that even work? It might seem totally chaotic, but believe it or not, there's a really powerful logic at play. Okay, so here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll get into that fundamental tug of war that sets prices. Then, we'll meet the two main players, supply and demand. After that, we'll see how they find their perfect balance, what's called equilibrium, and what happens when that balance gets all shaken up, either by market shifts or, even by government rules. All right, let's dive in. All right, so think about it like this. Every single market is basically a giant game of tug of war. You've got buyers on one side, right? They want to pay as little as possible. And on the other side, you've got sellers who want to charge as much as they can get away with. That final price you see on the tag, that's just where the rope settles after that constant struggle. Now, to really understand this, economists have this model they love to use called a perfectly competitive market. Just picture a place where every single buyer is laser-focused on getting the most bang for their buck, and every seller is obsessed with making the biggest profit possible. I mean, it sounds like total chaos, doesn't it? So the big question is, how do these completely opposite goals ever find some kind of stable middle ground? Well, the answer lies in this incredible dance between two massive forces that shape, literally, every price you've ever paid: demand and supply. So first up, let's talk about market demand. And this isn't just what one person wants. It's the grand total of what everyone, all consumers combined, are willing and able to buy at a certain price. And the basic rule here is pretty intuitive, right? When the price of something goes down, people generally want to buy more of it. Simple as that. And then you've got the other side of the coin, market supply. This is the total amount of a product that all the companies out there are willing to make and sell at a given price. And here, the logic just flips. When the price goes up, companies are way more motivated to supply more of it because, well, they can make a bigger profit. And there it is. That's the core conflict, laid right out for you. Buyers are always trying to pull that price down. Sellers are always trying to yank it up. Every single market you can think of, from the corner coffee shop to the New York Stock Exchange, is really just a system for figuring out this fundamental tension. Okay, so if buyers and sellers are constantly pulling in opposite directions, how does anything ever actually get sold? Well, they have to meet somewhere in the middle, at a point of agreement, a kind of sweet spot that economists have a special name for: market equilibrium. Equilibrium, it's like this magical moment where the market just clears. The amount of stuff that sellers want to sell at one price is exactly the same as the amount of stuff that buyers want to buy at that exact same price. There are no leftovers, and nobody's going home empty-handed. That price, the one that makes all this happen, that's your equilibrium price. You know, the famous economist Adam Smith had a really cool name for the force that guides markets toward this balance. He called it the invisible hand. It's not some person or government committee making decisions. It's just the natural pressure of the market itself. But what happens when the price is just plain wrong and the market is all out of whack? This is where that invisible hand really starts to do its job. See, if the price is too high, sellers end up with a surplus, a bunch of stuff just sitting on shelves they can't sell. So what do? They're basically forced to lower their prices. Now, flip it. If the price is too low, you get a shortage. Buyers are literally lining up, but there's not enough to go around. This gives sellers the power to raise their prices. See how both situations naturally push the price right back towards that equilibrium point? Okay, I know this might sound a little abstract, but we can actually calculate this. We can pinpoint the exact equilibrium price with some pretty basic math. Let's just walk through a super quick example, using a market for wheat. It's a simple three-step process, and you'll see exactly how we find that point where supply and demand meet. All right, stick with me for a second here. Let's imagine the demand for wheat can be described as 200 minus the price. Makes sense, right? As the price goes up, the demand goes down. And let's say supply is 120 plus the price. As the price goes up, farmers want to supply more. So to find that sweet spot, we just set those two equations equal to each other. This is the moment we're solving for that one single price where both the buyers and the sellers are happy. And when you do the math, when you solve that simple equation, boom, we find our equilibrium price, 40 rupees per kilogram. At exactly this price, the market is in perfect balance. Every single kilo of wheat that farmers want to sell gets bought by consumers. It's perfect harmony. Okay, but let's be real. The world isn't some static math problem. Things change all the time. So, what happens to our nice, neat little equilibrium when some big factor, like, say, everyone's income, suddenly changes? So, why would demand just suddenly go up? Well, imagine everyone in the country suddenly got a big raise. For something like clothes, what economists call a normal good, people would just buy more, even if the prices didn't change a bit. And that doesn't just move a point on the graph, it shifts the entire demand curve.
And this brings us to a super important rule of thumb. When more people want to buy clothes, but the supply of clothes hasn't changed, you suddenly have a shortage at the old price. The market's invisible hand has to react. It finds a new equilibrium, and here's the result. Both the price of clothes and the total amount of clothes sold will go up.
Okay, so now that we've got a handle on how a free market finds its own balance, let's use this model to look at something really important that happens in the real world. What happens when a government decides the market price isn't fair and decides to step in and control it? All right, first up, you have something called a price ceiling. This is a legal maximum price that can be charged for something. You usually see this for essentials like food or rent, and the goal is a good one, make things more affordable. But here's the key. For it to have any effect, the ceiling has to be set below the natural market equilibrium price. But what does our model say will happen? Well, it predicts a very clear outcome. By artificially forcing the price down, the government makes people want to buy more of it. But at the same time, it makes companies want to supply less of it. So what's the result? You get excess demand, which is just a fancy way of saying a shortage.
And that shortage leads to some very predictable and often unfortunate consequences. You might see crazy long lines or waiting lists for apartments. The government might even have to start rationing things. And pretty often, a black market pops up where people sell the item illegally at a much higher price, a price that's probably a lot closer to the original equilibrium anyway.
Now, the opposite of a price ceiling is, you guessed it, a price floor. This is a legal minimum price. The two classic examples are agricultural programs that guarantee farmers a certain price for their crops, and, of course, the minimum wage, which sets a floor on what you can pay for an hour of labor. And just like with the ceiling, our model gives us a pretty clear prediction. By setting a price above the natural equilibrium, like a higher minimum wage, you encourage more people to supply their labor. They want those higher paying jobs. But you also discourage companies from demanding that labor because it's now more expensive. So you end up with an excess supply, a surplus. And in the job market, a surplus of labor means one thing: unemployment.
So, as we've seen, this whole dance between buyers and sellers, it creates this incredibly powerful self-correcting system. But we've also seen that when we try to override that system, even when we have the best intentions, it can lead to things like shortages or surpluses. And that leaves us with a final, really crucial question to think about. If markets are such powerful balancing acts, when, if ever, is it actually right for us to intervene?